Greetings. I just wanted to read a little bit. Well, the last I thought I would read Isaiah 59 and just say a few words, but it usually doesn't end up how I might think it goes. There's so much in his word for his people. Realizing something for us to realize is that his word is for his people, and his commandments, his judgments are for his people. And those to whom it's not for them right now. But, stepping back and not saying what someone would believe in their mind as hard words so that they can, feel good, sound good, smooth words, lies, is doing evil. It's too bad then that his words are hard. So it's for his people. They're supposed to be, his people have his spirit, and they're of the people we read of for his people. The few, but there are many called, and then there's the nations, the unbelieving, that don't claim anything or have something else going on, other religions and gods and whatever. Then there's the many called, and then there's the few, the remnant, as scripture says, the few. It's for us, the many called, it's not for them, and it's not for the rest of the unbelieving world and nations to observe his commandments. It's not for them. And then being careful to command and point fingers and read these words and think that that's the utter understanding. What we read here, it is, and yet it's not. In that his word is spirit, and that's how it applies to us. He's got to give the meaning of Deuteronomy or any given word to someone so they can see it and live it as Messiah lived it, lived every word. So it's not by our own power, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to read that somewhere in Deuteronomy 8 too, a warning. Deuteronomy 8, it just so many times, it's amazing how often it's in his word, how forgetful and utterly lost this world is, but specifically the church world, it's forgotten the creator, like we read, and everyone's a lost sheep or scattered, and he's building a kingdom until he destroys all these nations. It sounds harsh once again, so that he can show mercy to all with the kingdom in due time. In the meantime, this is what's for his people. Every commandment which I command you today, you must be careful to observe, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land of which Yahuwah swore to your fathers. It's supposed to be connected to, the fathers in this, in that there is a connection. Just because the Spirit wasn't poured out with power to carnal Israel back then, they still were, his people, a called special people, but they didn't complete or fulfill what those words really mean: a royal priesthood, a holy, set-apart nation. They only did naturally. So then it's only for those that are the called and faithful, the chosen ultimately, and we can't pretend that's what we are until the race is finished. Only then, that's it. Until then, there's a race to run. So in the middle of a race, it's pretty stupid to stop and say, I finished it. These pictures are great because the picture gives a natural understanding and picture in our mind. And we go, wow, that is stupid naturally. So then spiritually, you can maybe see the stupidity a little bit better. And that's what his word, he gives these parables and pictures, and even the examples of everyone else's life before are ultimately even parables for us now. And someone runs a race to get some kind of prize, to finish the race and get the reward of whatever the race reward is for finishing it. Run it like you're going to finish and win, box to giving some carnal examples, the apostle there, box to win, don't just beat the air, it's pretty stupid. No one goes into a boxing arena to box the air and then gets punched down and loses. That's not why they go in there, right? They go there to win. And yet we're not talking about boxing or running a literal race, but it's something like that. If we're running a race constantly, you need to have like strong legs, spiritually speaking, and garments that don't wear out. And you got to have water and food, and you got to keep going. And when you picture this race, marathon that you run, when people say, they're in their mind and heart saying this, whatever it is inside the heart that's saying is what matters, not just the words people say. In the heart, saying to self, thinking, believing as if it's true already. I won the race, I finished. And you're only like 5% done, or 50, or it doesn't matter what percentage, not done is the point. And so it's like a race, this trial, this testing, this hard time going through this world. And the land represents something, and it's for us today, even though it's is that a delivery? Let me see. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I got a few minutes though, because it's a restaurant. So, but stopping anywhere in the middle of the race, finish line, and thinking and saying, "I won. I'm done." Then whatever someone's heart believes, so it is. So the person stops because his heart says, "I made it already," and doesn't finish the race while it thinks it's acting as if it will finish it, as if it's already finished, and it's not finished. It's a trick. And spiritually speaking, the church world, for example, many called of Israel that we have for examples. You can't stop and think and say it's finished and then want to go back to Egypt and then still think it's going to be finished in the same way. Every commandment which I command you today, you must be careful to observe, that you may live and multiply and go and possess the land which Yahuwah swore to your fathers. You here is for his people. That's what it's for. For his people. It's not for Israel only. Carnal Israel back then. Israel always ever present. Spiritual Israel today, though, instead of carnal Israel. These words are for us. And it's for those coming out of the church world, they start finding out it's for us. We got to live it. And we don't do this through self-power and get tricked by the command that you must be careful to observe. These things have to be given to understand. We do all these things. This is what someone should be doing. But already doing that with the power of the Father doing the works and giving us the understanding. So yes, we got it, and yet it's not by our own ability, which carnal people get tricked in denominations, religion, carnal Jews. It's not our own power, but yet these words are true. They are true. This is what his people will end up doing. Every commandment which I give you to must be careful to observe, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land. You shall remember that Yahuwah your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you and test you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna. And all these words are for us. He's going to allow times of looking back now, seeing that this is true, of like a spiritual hunger, and you don't know if he's even there. So it seems like that sometimes. This, it's for our benefit to know that he's going to allow a little bit of this. When and how for each person, I don't know, just that it's true. And then he'll give the food, he'll give you what you need to stay alive. He's not going to forsake his people. whether you keep his commandments. So he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know. And the Messiah quotes this scripture here because it's still true. Yes, for the new covenant, it's every word is true. That man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Creator, Yahuwah. Your garments did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. You should know in your heart that as a man chastens his son, so Yahuwah your Elohim chastens you. Know in your heart, therefore you shall keep the commandments of Yahuwah your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. There's a real fear there that needs to be perceived and given. For Yahuwah your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing. A land, I asked the disciples if they lacked anything, land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you can dig copper. When you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless Yahuwah your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Beware that you do not forget Yahuwah your Elohim by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, yes, his judgments, and his statutes which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them. Wow, what kind of prophecy is that? Pretty amazing prophecy. And when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up and you forget Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. The sons of Elohim bringing out the whole creation from the bondage of corruption. We read that in the New Testament somewhere, Paul's letters, the apostle, that the sons of Elohim will be revealed to bring out the whole creation from the bondage of corruption, but his people coming out first from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do you good in the end. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. It's beware. He said beware there. That you, after all these things, you say in your heart, in the heart, which is not with words. It's something that's in each individual's heart doing this and saying this. Looks a little different than saying words with the mouth. My power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. No such thing. And you shall remember Yahuwah your Elohim, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he swore to your fathers as it is this day. Then it shall be, if you by any means forget Yahuwah your Elohim and follow other gods and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish. As the nations which Yahuwah destroys before you, so you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim. That's it for Deuteronomy 8. And this perishing is understood. Like Messiah said, you would perish. You would perish now, destroyed now. Without the Father now is to be perished and destroyed. And going into destruction still yet further, into that great judgment that's to come still, that this world doesn't believe in. Judgments now and to come, to perish, be destroyed. And then this destruction will actually be for the purpose of destroying who and what we are, because that's the destruction. But there's two ways only. He who saves his soul shall be destroying it, And that's what we read there, saving their soul, to be destroying it, the wide gate. And he who's destroying his soul, so he shall be finding life. So either way, all souls must be destroyed. All must be destroyed. And those two verses that Messiah, those words Messiah gives, it makes it pretty obvious and apparent that the only way is actually destruction. But there's two ways, though. So those that forget him, they're going into destruction already perish. And it's to be in the spiritual destruction, like Messiah says, obvious verse here for, even the natural man to see something is wrong. Let the dead bury the dead. So those who are dead are also destroyed and perished. And this is the spiritual destruction. But all things natural first. When we read these words, they mean something for us, and the Father has to give the meaning and the spiritual understanding of the words. These words are spirit. It's not about a literal desert for us, but it's something like a desert. And, as we read his word and prophecy, someday Israel, what the Creator is doing with spiritual Israel, is building it up like he was building up carnal Israel through the physical seed of Abraham. And it was about from Abraham to Messiah, about 2,000 years. And now it's almost been that, from Messiah to where we are now, building up spiritual Israel, which is not flesh, is not from the literal seed of Abraham. That's not the important understanding, but that's what we read. That's what the people understood. They were carnal. And when we read this, it means something spiritual for us. It means that's not the true meaning what we read with letters. That's why the letters kill. But for them, for carnal man today, someone might say, keep his commandments, but they're reading the letters only, not realizing that carnal Israel has been wiped out from the face of the earth, never to come back again, not accepted, commanding everyone to repent for real. At times past, he winked at sin. So his people are needing to repent for real in the heart, unlike any other time before Messiah. And so to be what the letters are today is just to be religious only. Doesn't matter what form or division. Doesn't matter if it's Christianity or carnal Jews that say something about commandments. It's to be religious only and to be an enemy of the Creator, not understanding that the commandments mean something for the heart. So the letters, you can't put into words or letters spiritual, invisible things. His word is spirit. And so it's amazing how he put it all together, that what we read is true, and yet there's a carnal, natural way, the letters only, flesh that kills by itself. The flesh profits nothing, can't please him in the flesh. And then these words mean something, spirit, which gives life. The spirit gives life, and keeping these things in spirit, in the heart, is what it really means, what every word really means. And Messiah is quoting scripture because it's always true. It's amazing what they do in religion and Christianity, saying if they're cornered a little, we only believe in Messiah's words, not the Old Testament, not the old way, not understanding what the Old and New Covenant even is. Self-righteous and the Father's righteousness. The old is the carnal and the new is spiritual, the Father's power and his spirit. Not even realizing that it didn't go away. It's just the new covenant now. He gives us the power to do what's required. That always was the true meaning. But it wasn't the right time yet with old Israel. They were not able to do what we read in prophecy, which is bring all people to and judge all peoples and be the greatest nation, be the head and not the tail, for the purpose of all creation knowing and flowing to Israel. It's going to happen. It's going to happen through the Creator's way, building instead of physical seed from physical Abraham, like we read. All things were fulfilled natural already. And that's how all things were fulfilled and yet not fulfilled still. And that's how often we say that like that because of this understanding. It is, and yet it's not still. Something's lacking. So Messiah is like the picture with Adam and Eve. You know, the Father and Messiah, Adam and Eve have sons, flesh, you know, kids, but then sons to the Creator. The real meaning of sons is to have his spirit, and that's to be a son of the Creator, as Messiah was the first. So the Father and Messiah are building the kingdom, spiritual Israel, having sons, pouring out the Spirit on whomever the Father wills and gives Messiah to choose. And like he built carnal Israel through Abraham's flesh seed, Messiah taught the spiritual seed by saying, you know, you're of Abraham's seed, carnal first, acknowledging that. Then he said, if you were from Abraham's seed, you would do the works of Abraham, which is obey the Creator's voice, which is his commandments, judgments, statutes, laws, you know, precepts like we read over and over again. Obey his voice. And then they said, we're not illegitimate children, but he was speaking spiritually now and not natural like he did first. Spiritually, if you were Abraham's seed, see, spiritual seed he's teaching. And Paul the apostle says it more simply, more plainly. The Messiah are already given to see and understand this first, and he taught it first. He's given by the Father these things to understand. And so now to be a son has nothing to do by itself with Abraham's seed. It has no profit by itself, because someone can be from Abraham's seed and do evil with their heart all day long and break his spiritual law in the heart all day long. And it's been a while now, just like it was from Abraham to the end, building a kingdom in Israel, 12 tribes. It's spiritual Israel in Revelation. That's what's happening. The 12 tribes are spiritual from the Father, from Abraham's seed, in that connected to Abraham because of Abraham being called and chosen by the Father, and that from him, from his seed, and it is literal, from his seed, Messiah came from the line of Abraham, and from his physical seed connection to humanity, because he's a man, he's not God. And from the seed of David, that all nations would be blessed. So this plan is working out throughout time, the Father and Messiah, and no one else above in heaven or anything, only Messiah. And the Father pours out his Spirit on someone and they become a son. And he's building spiritual Israel, but not flesh this time. And in almost the same amount of time as it was with the natural Israel. And now he gives over to the Gentiles, Messiah said, to produce the fruit of it, which was abomination to the carnal Jews, because everything was flesh and self-righteousness and pride in the heart, thinking, you know, this is the greatest abomination. The dogs are going to produce the fruit of the kingdom, and our kingdom's going to be destroyed? Yes, because it's carnal. It doesn't stand with the Creator. So that judgment finally came on Jerusalem, and it got destroyed in 70 AD. That much is true. And being handed over to the nations, the Gentiles, doesn't mean he accepts the nations and Gentiles. It means that most of the believers from that point on forward would be specifically not from the seed of Abraham physically. Most of those that are called to be chosen would be from the nations, Gentiles, to be grafted into the olive tree. But there would still be some that are, you know, that's what the apostle's saying. He's a Hebrew. He's from the stock of Benjamin. You know, he's saying he didn't utterly put them away, but most would be called from the Gentile. And when we read the parable of, tell him we're suffering, you know, to do, you have Moses, they're not understanding what's going on here. It has nothing to do with being burned in hell for all eternity with one drop of water coming down. It's speaking of those, the carnal Israelites would be partially blinded this whole entire period of time, and most of them wouldn't be, but only a few of them. And they would be blinded until end until the Gentiles' calling is fulfilled, until it's filled up, until all the Gentiles that would be called and grafted into the olive tree, because there is no other nation. It's only spiritual Jerusalem and not pagan Christianity or outside of Jerusalem and his commandments and covenants. And that until the end, which is the Gentiles being fulfilled, the number is finally called, that this would be like this until the end. So whoever, the carnal Hebrew blood or Abraham, that most of them would be blinded until this end. And that the Gentiles, the nations, it's like he flipped the table over on the carnal man, on the carnal Jerusalem. And they were not perceiving or understanding what was happening and why this judgment, when their kingdom is taken from them. And now what we read in Deuteronomy, the holy nation and a set apart people and special nation, is the spiritual Israel. That's the real fulfillment of this prophecy, and not carnal Israel, because his kingdom isn't destroyed, and yet Jerusalem was destroyed because it's carnal. And they were warned and they couldn't do it. And he's showing this massive thing, that man cannot do it himself. That is the point, that man cannot do the works and be good himself. He's not good. And so then spiritual Israel is the fulfillment of the holy nation and the priesthood, because we read that somewhere in Peter or in the New Testament somewhere saying, this is prophecy for us. This is what he's doing. The set apart people, a special people that are called first fruits, that are called and chosen first. And he's building the kingdom. And all at the end, because of the resurrection, will receive the promises that we read of. It applies for all equally. And that's the only way it could be true, is the resurrection of the dead. And then spiritual Israel, his kingdom, will do what we read in prophecy already. This time it'll be accomplished because it's spiritual Israel. It's saved with salvation. And they're not carnal anymore. They've overcome sin and death because of the power of the Father. And it's going to be a spiritual nation that's going to be able to do what carnal Israel failed to do, which is lead all people to the Creator. It's amazing what they've done. It's amazing what carnal Christianity, carnal Israel, the many called, have done. It's for that very purpose that all people know him. And his kingdom already judged the world in types, natural, with sword, with fighting, with destruction of the flesh. But spiritual Israel will not do that literal thing. It will do the spiritual meaning of that, with judgment, with righteousness, a spiritual destruction for the age, to bring back creation to the Creator, so that all will be saved through this judgment. And that's how all things were fulfilled already, and yet they're not. It's the two things, the natural and the spiritual, the old and the new, the old wine, the new wine, the carnal, the spiritual, the heavenly, the earthly. The earthly is things of the flesh, natural, carnal, and heavenly is spiritual, things of the heart, things of spirit. So the prophecies are in Scripture abundantly in every book, like we read in Acts. Every prophet from the beginning, from the foundation of the world, spoke of the restoration of all things. And this is how he's doing it. Those that overcome sin and death in this life, they have reward. They will have salvation at the end, as everyone at the same time will. Each in its own order, but it's all at the end. No one before someone else, thousands of years, It's kind of hard to put into words, like all the things that he's, shown in spiritual understanding and prophecy. But New Jerusalem will do what Old Jerusalem couldn't do. And so Messiah will reign. He's been reigning in his people, but he's going to reign in the kingdom until all is accomplished and fulfilled for real this time, because the first fulfillment is a type, is in the natural. It's not the real thing with the heart. That's what's lacking. The heart was always lacking. That's all. It's not that his creation, what he created, is messed up or wrong. He did all these things on purpose, the creator, with purpose, on purpose, for purpose. And you know, the flesh, the flat carnal body, flesh, lowly, earthly, you know, that's the war. Warring against the flesh, the members of the flesh. The spirit is willing in someone that has the Father to do what's required always. Warring against the flesh. So the only way we can overcome sin and death is keep going through this war, and the Father cuts off a little here and there of the flesh. But this is a spiritual understanding, which the natural is shown first, you know, to destruction of the literal flesh. Cameras over here. But now that's only a type, and that wasn't the real thing to destroy some. You know, cutting off the hand doesn't fix the heart, but cutting it off, spiritually cutting off the old man, the flesh, so that you don't do evil, you know, so because the old man always wants to do evil in the heart, because he's no good. He needs to be destroyed piece by piece. That is the narrow way in Messiah. That the man is no good at all. The carnal man, old man, is zero good. He's so bad, he needs to be cut off and destroyed utterly. And the wicked will be destroyed. But right now, for those that know the Father, it's a little here, a little there. Cut off the hand, which causes to sin. They don't understand this. They'll even be desperate and say, yeah, you should cut off the hand and pluck your eyeballs out, because they cannot bear not knowing what that really means. They don't see what that means. A natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of the Father. It cannot comprehend or perceive it, even if you give the words. And I've heard it face to face. You know, yeah, well, what does it mean? Yeah, you should cut off your hand. I'm not even joking. They've said it face to face that you should cut off your hands and pluck your eyeballs out. Then I say, how come you don't do that? How come no one's doing that? And they get angry. And then it's over. They rage. Why do the nations rage? Because they're carnal and they're in sin and darkness upon the face of the deep. They're lawless in their heart. So Messiah will say to them, I never knew you, never had a personal knowledge, didn't know him in spirit, to know the Father with personal knowledge, to have in spirit. Away from me, workers of lawlessness, in the heart, not speaking as of Moses, as of carnal. When he says lawlessness, it's in the heart. And this world is utterly lawless in the heart. It's abomination. It's completely lawless in the heart. And the end is the beginning, and the beginning is the end. In the beginning, there was no laws. It was all out of order, the creation itself. And he declares the end from the beginning. And so the end, the creation, spiritually now, people's hearts, the creation, the people, not literal creation as a type, is lawless in the heart, and it's void and it's chaos inside in the heart, and it's and the Spirit of the Father is hovering over the, you know, the waters of the deep foundation, however we read there, on the face of the deep. It's out of order, it's out of time, it's lawless in the heart. That's the understanding. First the natural, first the creation itself is lawless. And he puts order into how much of the creation, the literal creation, all of it without partiality. It will receive laws and order, which is life. Which anyone that can even remotely read anywhere in Scripture, keeping his commandments is life. Breaking them is death. You know, blessings and cursings. What does Christianity do with this? Well, the Israel there in the Far East, those who bless them are blessed, and those who curse them are cursed. You know, monstrous nonsense. Carnal Israel doesn't exist. It was destroyed. Only spiritual Israel exists. It grew up. So those who curse the Father's people, of which the world does not know who they are, and accept them, and never will believe they're an actual believer because they're hidden in Messiah, just like Moses' body was hidden. The body of Messiah and all the members attached to the body are hidden, just like Moses' body was hidden. They cannot perceive with spiritual eyes that someone is of Messiah. They will not believe it. They cannot believe it. It doesn't matter if a carnal man from religion hears these words and says, oh, I hear these words now. They will still not believe anyone in Messiah that they're an actual believer, because no one can break the Father's spiritual word, an actual prophecy in the heart. No one ever has done that. So they will not believe. Anyone who doesn't have the Father in them will not know and believe or perceive the Father's people, because they're hidden. And I remember, when he gave me this revelation that the body of Moses, body of Messiah is hidden. It's amazing because you get to see it. You get to see it be fulfilled, and it truly has not been broken. They literally cannot believe it. They won't. So we're not supposed to try desperately to get someone to please believe I'm a believer, because it becomes a sin when the knowledge comes in from above. It becomes a sin because we're like begging to break the Father's word. That's not even possible. So you just accept it, and he gets you to deal with it somehow in a proper way. Those scriptures are for us. Body of Moses is hidden. For those in Messiah, they're scattered throughout this world, and no one recognizes them or believes that they're his people. You got Christianity, basically, religion out there in and of this world, but his people, they're despised, who don't know the Father. It just must be that way. It's only truth. It just is. And there's nothing anyone can do about it to change the enmity in Genesis between the serpent seed and the woman's seed, spiritual Israel. So Eve even represents something greater than herself, because she's the mother of all the literal living, and if that wasn't true, she couldn't be, the spiritual meaning wouldn't be true. And I know that doesn't mean anything to carnal people, but anyone that believes, it's valuable and means something. Eve is literally the mother of all living, because if that wasn't true, then spiritually the woman wouldn't be the mother of all living in Messiah, alive in Messiah now, instead of dead, the spiritual dead. Let the dead bury the dead. So she's literally, but it's teaching something greater. Woman represents, like Revelation gives us a strong clue, a hint that the woman is spiritual Israel, and she's the one that's of the Father, his people, that keep the laws and commandments, that keep the commandments. When it says keep the commandments, it's for spiritual Israel. It means keep them in the heart, what they really mean, not carnal, like carnal Israel. If the Pharisees were keeping the commandments so good, they wouldn't have been destroyed, and Jerusalem would have stood and stood the test of time, I guess you could say. So then it's an amazing, everything he's given me to see, it's an utter abomination to the church world. He's proven they hate it. They can't stand it. Because their system and their life and their religion is proof against what this really means, hidden in Messiah. The whole world knows them. They're the Christians, but it's way deeper than that. It means they will not perceive with spiritual eyes, because they have eyes but cannot see. So the only way to see his people is to be one of them. And then one brother would see another, or sister or mother or father. It doesn't matter. There's no female or male in the kingdom. Those things don't matter. That's why, Messiah taught that. Who are my brothers, mothers, fathers, and sisters? He taught that because he got it from the Father. That those things concerning that doesn't matter. That doesn't have any sway or say by itself. Tall, short, male, female, neither does it for the mark of the beast. None of those things matter for the mark of the beast. Tall, short, black, white, brown, whatever, male, female. All who have the mark, they hate Messiah's people, and the devil sends a flood. But the earth helps the woman, spiritual Israel, all of them. and swallows the flood so it doesn't do what the devil really wants to do, is destroy them utterly and take their life, spiritual life, within the Father's life, the oil in the lamp that keeps the lamp lit. Without oil, there's no light. Without his spirit, there is no light. They can't see what darkness is and what light is, but it's something like literal light and dark. And this is why the creation has been created with incredible amount of meaning, because even light and dark has deep spiritual meaning, and the lamp and the oil and everything. But it's not literally about literal oil and literal light, but it's important in that that's the true natural understanding. Light is good and darkness is evil. And the Father has no darkness in him, not even a speck. So, he doesn't have any evil intentions. He doesn't have a carnal hatred for humanity. This is not understood by carnal man, because they read and get tricked. By reading, he hates all who work iniquity. I can't give that. No one can give that, to rightly divide and then see the spiritual understanding of how that's true and how the other thing is true without contradicting. You can't, I don't even know how to put it into words, but he gives those that seek him, he'll give understanding. And those that seek him are those that are ultimately called and chosen, because anyone else won't seek him, because they need to be saved. They can't do it themselves. The doors are shut, the windows are closed and covered, and there's a veil over everyone within, and there's a veil over all the nations. It's going to be lifted someday. Yes, just like we read, for all peoples, because all the families of the earth will be blessed through the literal seed of Abraham. And then it's fulfilled spiritually seed, because after Messiah coming from the literal seed of Abraham connection, now Messiah in heaven, the Father giving Messiah all those he gives him, the Spirit is poured out on his people and their sons. And that's how they're spiritually seed of Abraham, listening to the Father's voice inside, in the mind and heart and spirit, and doing what he says and keeping his commandments like that, learning them. Growing in Messiah, there's nothing to grow without this understanding. It doesn't mean anything for those that don't know him. Growing, everything's growing, it's like a giant clue. Everything's growing on the earth. It starts small and grows, like the kingdom within, and then the kingdom from without, if you will. Just because the kingdom is only within right now doesn't mean at all that the kingdom isn't, on a grand scale. It will be. That's at the end, when the Gentiles are done being called. Until then, carnal Israel is blinded. Until the number of Gentiles be fulfilled, and come in. It's a monstrous, some of the things people say. What they say is like, oh, Gentiles being grafted into the olive tree were only called for like 40 years, and then it was over. And now they're in the age of incorruptible with incorruptible body and immortal. They say that they're already that, because they say they believe they're a god in their own mind, immortal. They say that they're in the next age already. They're like the angels already, immortal. It's amazing. It is utterly amazing that someone would teach some abomination like that. But without knowing, they catch people. It's like a spiritual spell. It like draws you in because you don't know. When he gives you to know, it ends up being pretty stupid what they teach. They don't realize that, he's building a kingdom just like he was with Abraham's physical seed, but now spiritual seed, and it's an age, and it's a long age, just like that other age was. Almost 2,000 years from Abraham to Messiah's death and resurrection. It might be pretty close to the same for spiritual Israel and building of his real kingdom that have a heart from above, and not carnal Israel with no heart, just stones. And it's almost been about the same time. And there's plenty of other signs that tell us we're pretty close to the end of the age. and that there is a such thing as the end of the age. Messiah spoke of it. He's not speaking from Moses' perspective. He's speaking about those in Messiah forward in the new covenant age. At the end of the age, there is an end, like we read. And that's the age when Israel receives salvation and is like the angels in that they cannot die, like literally, anymore, because they don't have corruptible bodies. Updated, if you will, just better, something different, something better, not made of the dust of the earth. No one knows what that is like. Why try and pretend to do that is to start doing evil. That's why the apostle says, fool, you fool, oh fool, because carnal man goes into things he doesn't know constantly and acts like he does. And so that they'll do that, and we could see a little bit there. Someone's doing that, or some people are doing that. He says, oh fool, don't you know that, the thing needs to die first and then it becomes what it's supposed to become. And it's like a little bit of wheat or grain or something. It's only like a type of what it will be now. But it seems harsh, the Creator has to give us the understanding of what's going on. And there's a lot more going on there. That's why he says fool, because he's perceiving carnal people talking about things they don't know and teaching it as if it's truth. They're doing evil. And they're only focused on carnal things and not the things of the Creator. That ends up being a fool, that doesn't know him. And so carnal people will do that. They talk about things that don't matter, that they can't even perceive, that no one can perceive. Because you can't perceive what was never had or received yet. And we even read it just in case someone, says it's a lie. We know not yet what we shall be. What do they think that means? But when we see him, we'll be just like him. Don't know. Maybe some things are revealed in that he reveals that things are not revealed. So this is one of those things that it's not revealed to anyone. They don't know exactly what this would be like. And that's a disciple saying that. We don't know, except some mystery. I think I gotta go now and pick this thing up. But at the end of the age, in Revelation, the reapers, that's like a symbol that represents something real. The way it works with his symbols and truth is the symbol, the reapers, don't represent something else that's a symbol and not real. It's monstrous, but I've seen people do that too. We even read there the angels. Yeah, there's a separation, Yeah, it's time to fear the Creator, because he could just throw us down like a rag doll. Although that's not who he is. He's not a monster, but there is a judgment to face, and there is a separation for the age. And that's what this world will not actually believe in the heart for itself. It won't believe it. Just his people will. They get confused with the things that are now spiritual, which a carnal man can't see, and the things to come. But they don't see how it's all true now, and yet it's still not filled up yet. The things to come, they can't rightly divide. That the promises we read in Scripture are for his people and not those that are not right now. And there's a purpose for it all, and it's shown in Joseph with Pharaoh, and then Joseph, he feeds the brothers that hated him. It's like a little picture of the grand thing, and we even read that plainly with words that they hate, that the sons of the Creator will be manifested, and then the whole creation will be brought into the liberty from the bondage of corruption, which is sin and death, into the liberty of the sons of the Creator, Elohim. Whole creation. Just in case they're confused, it says whole creation, but they like to play that game with all, and all doesn't mean all or whatever, carnal, evil. They don't like the truth. So there's a purpose for the kingdom, and it's going to do what the carnal kingdom couldn't do. It's pretty simple, actually. Because man can't do it of himself. That's what the teaching is. That's the grand revelation. And so self-righteousness is a severe sin. I mean, it's to not know the Father at all and do evil continually. No one can do the good works, but a carnal man is tricked because he thinks he can start keeping the commandments naturally, and it has nothing to do with the heart by itself. Although there is a connection in a proper way, it can be kept carnally like that without any heart at all, out of only pride and self-righteousness, And these have the same hatred towards Messiah's people as anyone else. That's the scary thing. The carnal Jews were prideful and self-righteous, and they murdered Messiah. They hated him. Oh, and they taught the law. They didn't do away with Moses as Christianity did, utterly. You could say it's almost gotten worse. It has. But then there's people out there that, you just can't forget, just because someone teaches Moses. They murdered Messiah because he's real, because he has the Father Spirit in him. And the carnal man is enmity, at war with the spiritual. And Genesis says it plainly, the serpent seed and the woman's seed was true naturally. And then Messiah forward the reality of the spiritual